Our gospel lesson today comes from Luke, the 15th chapter. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling, saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me." So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself up with the pods that the pigs were eating. No one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare? But here I am, dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But when he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then he said to his son, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But his father said to his slaves, 'Quickly bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now he is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked, 'What's going on?' And he replied, 'Your brother came home, and your father has killed the calf, because he has got him back safe and sound.' And then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all of these years I have been working like a slave for you. I have never disobeyed your command, and yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I may celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you kill the fatted calf for him?' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" This is the gospel of the Lord. So there's this guy, born and raised in East Baltimore. His father and his father's father before him own a little manufacturing business. They make moorings and other dock equipment for ships in the harbor. For 50 years now, his family has been servicing equipment for the marinas and shipping companies in the area. He's been working for his father alongside his older brother since he was a kid, learning the ropes of the business. The thing is, though, he's just not that into it. He just knows it isn't for him. He's been thinking a lot lately that he really wants to travel, to see the world, to experience other cultures, and not be bogged down with all this responsibility of running a business, especially one he doesn't even really care about. So he goes to his dad and he's like, "Hey, Dad, can I have my share of the inheritance now? I really feel like I want to go in a different direction with my life." And to his surprise, his dad says yes. So now he's a young adult feeling the freedom from his parents for the first time. He moves to LA and gets a sweet penthouse and throws a lot of parties, like a lot of parties. He's thinking, this is the life. Party all night and sleep all day and throw all of your worries away. Like really fully living into the Black Eyed Peas song. But alas, when you spend, eventually you run out of money. And the party ends, And all you're left with is a big hangover. So what's a guy to do? He doesn't want to go home. Be a little too ashamed to do that, I think. He just blew through everything that he'd been given. And he still really doesn't want to make moorings with his life. He wants to be independent. He wants to get by all by himself. So he starts working a part-time job as a dishwasher in the back of a restaurant. Nothing glamorous, but it's something, right? It's not quite enough in such an expensive city. Not enough to keep the penthouse that he loves. He goes bankrupt, takes a foreclosure, and mostly now he just lives out of his car. Survives on eating the leftovers from the restaurant. He's pretty ashamed. Like, he knows that he's messed up. He feels so ashamed, but what should he do? He knows that he doesn't deserve to just go home, to expect anyone to forgive him, to get anything from his family. He hasn't called, not even once, not even to wish his mom a happy birthday, to check in on anyone. But after one more sweaty, cramped night in the back of his sedan, he thinks, what if I could go back and at least just be one of the hired hands, work on the docks. I could work on the docks. My dad is pretty good to all his employees, even the ones that are low on the ladder, right? Still better than nothing. At least there's food and a place to stay. So that's it. He sets off. He heads for home with nothing in his pockets and just a beat old rusty sedan. As a parent, you want your kids to be happy. And the parent can see that his son is not happy. This father feels like he has done his best. He's tried to teach his son the values, teach him how to love the harbor, love what he does, love what their family does. You can see his youngest son just isn't happy. He's not taking to this simple, humble life that they live. And his son comes to him one day and was like, hey, Dad, can I have my share? What's he supposed to do? If he says no, then his son will be unhappy and maybe even a little resentful and angry at him. He doesn't want to be a dictative father. He wants his children to feel like he cares because he really cares about them. He loves his children. So he thinks to himself, maybe it's for the best. Kids need to make their own mistakes, learn their own lessons, right? Maybe his son wasn't meant to stay in East Baltimore forever. Maybe he was meant to have happiness somewhere else, doing something other than this. I just want him to be happy. All right, so he agrees. Maybe it'll be all for the best. He tells himself that his son just needs to, go off and do his own things, and he'll find happiness somewhere else. But then he takes the money and he leaves. He doesn't call. Doesn't even check in on Sundays when they used to have family dinner. Doesn't hear from his son again. And so he starts to doubt himself. Maybe it wasn't such a good decision. Maybe I have lost my son forever. And he feels ashamed. Like he's made a horrible choice, and instead of, loving his son and providing what he really needed, he has enabled his son to become self-destructive. The oldest son knows that when his father dies, he will be the new family leader. That the responsibility that he bears, and he knows that he has had this responsibility since he was young, as the oldest. He never complains. He always does what he's supposed to do, and he takes care of his family. He knows that one day his dad's going to be old and frail, and he's going to have to take over everything. And he just wants to be a good son, a good man, someone his dad can be proud of, someone his dad will trust things to when he is gone. someone dedicated to the family legacy. He's proud to be his father's son. He's proud to be his grandfather's grandson, proud to bear their name and take on that full responsibility of his family someday. And one day, he's out in the welding shop, and it has been a long, hot day behind the sparks of the welding gun. And they're behind on a few orders, and he's really just trying to get everything done. And now he's exhausted, and he's running a little late, but he's going to head home now. And he heads home, and he pulls into the driveway, and he can hear it, and he can see it. There's a full-blown party happening in the house. And he's super confused, right? Like, they never party. They never do anything fun. They come home, they eat a nice, simple dinner as a family, and then they go to bed because they're going to start really early the next day. So when he comes home on like a random Tuesday night and there's this huge rager going on, he is super confused. And he sees one of their employees sitting in the drive just having a smoke. And he's like, what's going on? You know? And the guy's like, oh, your brother came home. And your dad was like so totally excited. And he told us to grab a bunch of stuff and throw a huge celebration just because your brother got home. And he's been gone like a really long time. The feeling was immediate. The anger bubbling up from somewhere deep down that he thought that he had repressed for so long. They're throwing a party for that idiot brother of his? And he's thinking, you've got to be kidding me, right? After all that he's done, they're throwing a party for him? No one ever throws a party for me. Not once. I work hard every single day. I take care of this family. I take care of this business. And this is the thanks that I get? They're celebrating this jerk? That guy? They're throwing a party for that guy? That guy who took all of my father's money and went out to California and squandered it all away? That guy? They're throwing a party for that guy? He's so filled with rage, he can't even think straight. It is so unfair, all of it. Earlier in the day, just coming towards the end of a lunch break, the father is finishing up his afternoon coffee, just sitting on the porch before he gets ready to head back to work. And he sees this beat-up old car come around the corner. Looks in the car and can see this sandy hair flapping around on the top of the head. Now the guy is still super small, like barely a dot at the end of the street. But he thinks to himself, hey, I know that hair. I watched him be born. I saw those sandy locks flop around when he learned to walk. I raised the hair on that head. And his heart skips a beat because he has prayed for this every single day. Every moment since his son left, he has regretted everything. Regretting giving his son that money, regretting watching him walk out on them, wondering what he could have done differently. His heart had broken too. And all he has wanted every single day since then is to see his son, to see him smile, to watch him laugh, to ruffle the hair on top of his head, to hug him. And there he is, driving down the street towards the house. The father, it just couldn't take it any longer. He sets the coffee mug down and just begins to run down the lane, longing to see his son, to hold him. And the son, seeing his father, pulls over to the curb, trying to figure out what he's going to do, right? So he gets out of the car and he just starts mumbling like, Dad, I'm sorry. But the father doesn't care. He doesn't need an apology from his son. It's his son, his baby. He should have never let him go, but somehow he came back. His heart has been broken for so long, and it's now becoming whole because he's home. This, the father says, calls for a celebration. In the middle of the party, he steps outside to just take a deep breath, to smell the fresh evening air and to take it all in. And he opens his eyes and he sees his older son standing there. And he's so giddy to tell him about it. But the instant he gets to his son, he can see it. The rage in his older son. And he just goes off, shouting about it being unfair, how they've taken advantage of him and no one ever appreciates him. He yells at his dad for a long time about this party that he's thrown to his brother after all that he's done to hurt you. How could you? How dare you? Family dynamics. Am I right? I retell this story to you in this way to try to draw out the fact that the world is not simple. And there's never just one perspective to any situation. Rarely is it fair, and seldomly do we get what we deserve. But their feelings are valid. Of course the older brother is angry. Of course the father has been guilt-ridden and heartbroken and is just so relieved to see his son. He missed him. And of course the younger son feels ashamed and has no idea how to even begin to make amends with his family. None of them are perfect, and they're all guilty of something in this story. Anger, jealousy, enabling, regret, estrangement, greed. See, this is how the human accounting system of good and bad works. If you do good things, you get rewards. If you do bad things, you get punished. That's only fair, right? This is our sense of fairness. But the thing is, God doesn't work that way. God doesn't have some grand accounting system where we each have our own checking accounts of good and bad deeds. That if you sin, you get a deduction, and if you are good, you get a payment in your account. And however it all shakes out in the end is either your reward or your punishment. Are you in the black or are you in the red? God is not keeping score in the same way that we like to keep score. That like, if you are the good little son and you are tallying all these good deeds, hoping to rack up a hefty balance in your God account, all of this may not actually seem like very good news. Makes people angry, made the son angry. Why spend all this time doing good things if it doesn't really matter? As Lutherans, we believe that we do these things because Jesus asked us to. We do these things in response to the gift of salvation, that what we have been given by God through Jesus Christ. Not to gain bonus points with God. In the words of Martin Luther, God doesn't need your good works, but your neighbor does. Now, if you've been less than perfect, this could seem like very good news. Like, woohoo, free money! So, Jesus sits with the tax collectors and the sinners. You know, the people who, by our accounting system, would have been way, way in the black, or in the red. People that would have super negative balances in their God accounts. And Jesus tells them this story. And it's definitely good news to them, right? Whereas the Pharisees, who are also listening in, who are righteous and noble, and they do everything by the letter of the law, are like, what? No, that's totally not fair. You see, God is not so good at accounting. Definitely, God was not a business major in college. God functions a lot less like an investment agency than God does like, say, a puppy adoption agency. Stay with me. See, the puppy adoption agency just wants all the puppies to be adopted. Now, yes, Fido chews on his blanket a lot. And yes, Rover doesn't care whatsoever about this potty training business. They still want every puppy to be loved. That no puppy is perfect. But they are all beautiful. And they have individual personalities and they just need to be loved. Imagine, however, if the agencies were to rate the puppies. Post a little score outside their cages from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. And Fido is super snugly right, so he gets a point for that. But he has a chewing problem, so that's -2 points. So he evens out somewhere around 7. And Rover gets a score of 5 because, like, who wants a puppy who is not potty trained and does their business all over the house? But Fluffy Fluffy, on the other hand, has never had an accident, and Fluffy always sits when she's told to. So Fluffy gets a 9.7. I don't know. Maybe there's an adoption agency out there that does this. I would be really sad if that were true. But the thing is this is our Jesus twist for the week. Because nobody is ranking us. Nobody is rating us. No one is keeping score on how good of a human that we are. God just wants to love us. Even when we're sinful, even when we're unfair, when we're angry or jealous or guilty, even when we feel ashamed and find it hard to love ourselves. God just wants to love us. And I say, thank God for that. Because sometimes I feel like the puppy who ate his blanket. Or the son that wanted to be independent so badly and then made a bunch of horrible decisions and damaged a lot of relationships in the process. And sometimes I feel like the son who works really hard and feels like no one ever appreciates what I do and gets pretty jealous. And sometimes I feel like the father who just feels guilty and heartbroken over a lost relationship, wondering what I could have done better in it. Well, guess what? God adopts all of these puppies. God loves us and gives us grace and mercy and forgiveness. Always. No matter what. So thanks be to God for that. Amen.